So one of the other things that we're doing is recycling water. Now, some of these techniques have been started. When we started out here, we put these two berms in right in front of this space. You can see these little hillsides here, right in front of the hammocks. Those didn't exist. The land was flat. I built those up to help protect from sound. Road noise is being absorbed into the soil, and to create more of a visual block from the street. And we could have just planted on the flat ground, but this way we actually have soil this high. You can't see through. And then we have plants on top, so it becomes easier to screen ourselves from the road. Well, then the roof was there, of course, and I had them build these awnings, which are not vinyl. I don't know if you've noticed, but this is actually shade cloth. So some sun still comes through, not so much, a little bit, and water comes through, not so much, but some. Whereas if you had a normal awning material, there'd be no sun and there'd be no water coming through. This actually allows the gardens to get watered by rain, and it allows some sunlight to come in, because most of these plants don't want to be in the dark, they just don't want to be in direct sun.
So strategic.
So that's what permaculture is using these strategies, intelligent strategies. But what happened was, if you notice, the awnings stopped just about over the center of the berms. And when we got our first big rains after they were in, the rain just ate these ditches in the top of the berms, because the berms weren't completely planted like they are now. I mean, the plants hadn't fully established themselves yet. It probably wouldn't be as much of an issue now with the plants as thick as they are. But at the time it was a big issue. So it was the first place we put gutters in. So now on top of the roof, the awning still is fine. There's not that much water on just the awning. But the roof has a gutter on it. It's the only place on the property that has a gutter, except the laundry tower, the water tank tower. That has to have a gutter because the roof extends right to the property edge, and I can't have my water landing on my neighbor's property unless he says it's okay. And he doesn't say it's okay. He doesn't want that. So we put a gutter there too. That's fine. And the plan is actually to gutter all the roofs eventually and to collect that rainwater. Now the only place we won't gutter is where we have thatch roof. And that's one of the downsides. Palm thatch roof, it's a natural material. It's readily available locally. Theoretically, if we had enough palm trees, we could grow enough ourselves. We don't have enough palm trees here. But the problem with it is because you have lots of living organisms in those roofs, there are things that live in those roofs, you can't really use the water. If you capture it, it's not the best water to use for drinking, etc. But on metal roofs, you can capture the water and use it. Now you still have to filter it, but you filter it by channeling it into a tank, a concrete tank. You allow it to cure. When you first do it, you wouldn't want to drink the water because it's going to have a lime taste. You allow that to cure and you throw the water off and fill it up once it's all set. Like a pool doesn't, a concrete pool doesn't put nasty stuff into the water once it's well cured. Same thing's true with the water tank. You leave a screen on top. You leave a window of screening material so nothing can get in there, and poop can't get in from birds can't get in there, but sunlight can get in there. Why? Well, that encourages the growth of algae. And the algae purifies the water. The algae actually eats the impurities in the water. Pretty cool. You create that system. And what happened here was, this was guttered, but we didn't have a tank to send it to. So what I did temporarily was, I channeled it down underground and up through these little rocks. And if you've noticed the little pool we have here, little pond there, that's being fed by rainwater all the time. It's never stagnant because when it rains, a lot more water comes in than we need for the pond. So it's not just bringing the water up a half an inch if there's a half inch of rain. It's bringing the water up a foot. And all that excess water is being channeled off into the garden because we created underground channels of gravel that direct the water to where we want it. Okay, so it's constantly refilling the pond with new water and channeling the rainwater to place in the ground. In the meantime, keeping a beautiful thing. And if you, unfortunately, only when it's raining, do you see the little fall running. We had a pump, but we burned it out. Something happened. It's not working anymore. We used to be able to recirculate that water all the time. Eventually, we'll do that again. But what will eventually happen is this channel and a gutter on the back of this roof, which is even bigger because it's the same size here, plus the whole back of the building, that's under a different roof, plus a roof on the buildings you guys are in, those will all get channeled to a series of concrete tanks. And so in the dry season, we'll have one more source of water. So, right now, we've never, in a year and a half, in the 7 years the property has been developed, they've never run out of water from the spring that was drilled here, the well we have on site. We have tons of water. If you guys weren't here, in the dry season, when we fill the pool, in most places, the water becomes pretty sparse in the dry season. So the town here has a water supply, which also comes to us in a little half-inch pipe, and we have access to that. We pay for it, however much we use. We don't always use very much, but it's there if we want. It's also spring water, but that spring gets pretty sparse in the dry season. There's very little water. Here on our property, when we fill up the pool, we empty it sometimes to clean it, whatever, we fill it back up, and we're still getting probably 100 gallons a minute in the dry season. Or maybe 20 or 50, I don't know what the amount is. It's a lot. It's gushing through that 1.5-inch pipe. And it'll run that way for 2 days. We've never run out, ever. It's never happened. But making sure that our plants have the water they need in the ground through the techniques we use, and having rainwater being stored instead of running off the property, which is what usually happens. Usually hits the roof, hits the ground, runs downhill. What's at the bottom of the hill here?
River.
A stream. Where does it go? I don't know, but somewhere else. It's going that way off the property. All that water is leaving the property, right? So we want to keep the water in the property. Water is precious. Nothing grows without it. So capturing rainwater is one way to be able to manage that resource. Another way is to actually build ponds that channel rainwater into a natural pond. And then you have it there should you ever need it. You've got storage for potentially thousands and thousands of gallons of water. We may or may not ever build that here because this is going to be a temporary location for us. We probably will be moving within 5 to 6 years as soon as I can figure out how to acquire 5,000 acres of land instead of 10, which is the plan. We'll talk about that another time. Any case, one of the other things that we're doing here, what happened here before I got here was that all the bathrooms all the fixtures went into septic tanks in the ground, septic systems. And the water was not lost completely because it's not like a plastic tank. It's actually going into something in the ground and with concrete, but then being allowed to filter into the ground. So we don't really lose it. But we don't have direct access to it either, not for a long time. And while you certainly need black water, there are 3 distinctions. You've got white water, which is clean water. You've got gray water, which is water that's been used, but not with human waste. So shower and sinks, that's gray water. Okay, whether it's the kitchen sink or the laundry sink or your bathroom sink, as long as you're not putting toxic chemicals in it, that's gray water that can be recycled and used in the garden.
Even with soap and shampoos and
As
long as they're all natural.
Ideally, you don't want to be using chemical products, and I've encouraged you, I've specifically requested you guys not bring any chemical products with you, nothing with a scent, which rules out almost everything right there, and that you not even use them if you're willing to. Don't use your soap, don't use your shampoo, don't use these products. A, they're harmful to you, B, they are harmful to the environment, most of them.
The soaps you have here, though.
Soaps we have here, perfectly natural, no problem whatsoever. Now, fortunately, plants do a pretty good job of keeping the nasty stuff out. Okay, so it's not like pesticides, poison spraying directly on the plant. Stuff that's in the water, they do a pretty good job of managing. But what we've done is, because we replumbed all the bathrooms, not all of them, not these 2 yet, but your bathrooms in the main building were all redone. The bathrooms, the one cottage that you guys are in, Alex, that's brand new. I just built that. And the building next door that you're in, Pia, that was redone. So that the sinks and showers of all the bathrooms no longer go to septic tanks. They currently dump on the ground. Eventually they'll dump into Graywater holding tanks that we will use for watering plants downhill from wherever the tank is. Without a pump you can't water uphill, but you can, and we got a lot of land downhill, so we can always use it to water anything that we're planting, whatever it is, that's downhill from where the tank lives. So instead of losing it, now right now, the kitchen, the laundry tub before we moved over there, the laundry tub does it now too, it dumps it right into the garden. So whenever the ladies are in there using the washing machine or the laundry tub, we use only natural laundry soap, no detergents at all, goes right into the garden. The kitchen sinks, there are 3 currently, 2 in the main kitchen, 1 in the back. My bathroom sink, I have a little kitchen outside of my apartment as well. All those sinks, same thing, they dump onto the ground in the gardens, directly watering those plants. We don't really need it in the rainy season, but it's a huge boon in the dry season where there's no rain, especially if we're starting things. They're getting a supply of water. As long as if someone's using the fixtures, there's water that's being distributed into the garden. And this is one of the things that you can do rather than, if you live in the United States or Sweden, any place where you have a municipal sewer and water system, typically what happens is, you open a tap in your bathroom or kitchen or laundry, where's that water going? It's going into the septic, into the municipal sewage system. Well, what if you just had water running? I mean, you weren't even doing anything. It's completely the same water you started with. It's just running right back out of the house, being lost. Okay? So there are places in the U.S., in some states it's difficult to get away with this. Laws are crazy, or ridiculous. In some places you can more easily do it than others, but you can set up Graywater recycling systems. No matter where you live, in most places, where do you do the same thing? Where instead of losing that water that's perfectly usable to the sewage system, it goes back into the garden and is maintained on the property. Okay? So these are some of the ideas. There are probably, here's one more main idea I want to share with you. It's sort of an organizational idea. One of the things about permaculture is you organize property into zones. So we're doing this to some degree here. I mean, you can't not do it because we don't, if you're in a place, if you use a lot of herbs or small plants, you normally have that right outside your kitchen where you use them. Makes sense, doesn't it? Most convenient. You step out your kitchen door, there it is. We don't really have much like that here. The closest thing is the papayas. The banana circles will be all over the property. Why? Well, because it takes bananas months to mature, and you have plenty of time to see when they're ready and to cut them and bring them in. You don't have to look at them every day. But papayas can change dramatically over the course of a week. And from one day to the next, all of a sudden, it's time to harvest them. And if you leave them on the plant, what happens? The birds and bats are going to eat into them. So papayas will be planted in zone 0, right here around the building for the most part. Now we're running out of space to do that, but I'm looking for places. They may be some of them in zone 1 or zone 2, a little further away. So typically if it's a home, let's say you're going to do your own homestay. You build a cottage, zone 0 is right around the house. Anything you need, small plants you want easy access to right there. Okay? Zone 1, things that are maybe a little bit slower to mature, you don't need access to every single day. Zone 2, you might have orchards. Now here it's all about fruit, so it's all orchards, it's all fruit trees everywhere. In a permaculture project, you always leave some land completely wild. You do nothing to it. You leave some percentage of the land to nature so that species can set up their own habitats as they would in the forest. You don't cultivate it at all. And then the next zone in from that might be, let's say you're growing hardwood, you're growing trees for lumber or firewood. That's a pretty slow project, right? So if you have a place where you're doing that, you might only have to go there 2 or 3 times a year. So you plant that as far away as possible without infringing on the zone that you leave wild. Okay, so it's a way of organizing everything.
Isn't it kind of making a zone of monoculture?
No, it's not making a monoculture zone, because if you're planting trees, it can be a variety of different kinds of trees. You still, in fact, one of the things I meant to share with you and haven't talked about yet, if you look at a natural forest, when you walk to the bottom of the property, what do you notice? You've got trees, but are all the trees the same height? You have some, what are they called? You have the top story, I can't remember what that's called, right? You have the tallest trees. There are some, if you look out, you'll see half a dozen or a dozen very tall trees here. They're going to be the tallest. Except those are the canopy trees that form the top of the forest canopy. Okay? Then you have understory trees, which might wind up being 10 or 20 feet lower than those. And then you have much smaller trees like the guayabas. The guayaba we stood underneath over here, which is probably 15 or 20 feet tall, won't get much taller than that. Okay? You have other fruit trees that are never going to be more than, say, 25 or 30 feet tall. So you have several stories of trees. Now, some of the fruit trees need some sunlight, so they can't be completely underneath everything. But you can have various different heights and still have sunlight penetrating down to them. You okay?
I'm good.
You also have the creeping plants on the ground, like the peanut grass, natural plants that grow on the ground. You have woody herbs. You have herbivorous plants that are woody. They're like little trunks, right? Some of them are completely soft, and then you have the woody ones that tend to be a little bit taller. What else did we see? Remember, growing into the guayaba tree, the guava tree? Lianas, vines. Okay, this is another form of life. So you want to think about all the different levels. In fact, we have overstory trees. We have the canopy trees, but you were asking about the tallest palm trees. If you notice, not here so much, but in some places you'll see pictures, you'll see this in movies, you'll see pictures, you'll see the jungle, and you'll have these very tall palm trees that pop through the top of the forest canopy. Okay? They're actually going right through. Now they're not very wide trees. They're not like 40, 50 foot, 80 foot wide trees. They're trees that might have a 10-foot canopy. So they're not shading the trees below them to any significant degree. Because as the sun moves across the sky, everything else is still going to get sun. But they're going to get sun too. So they come all the way up, right through the top of the canopy. So you wind up with 7 or 8 different strata. And you want to think about all those strata. So right now we're planting trees that are going to be tall canopy trees. They're going to be through the canopy trees, like some of the palms. They're going to be understory trees on a couple different levels. We've got shrubs like blackberries we're planting. And there'll be other ones too. Okay? We've got things on the ground we're planting, like the peanut grass. And fruits. In the summertime, we plant melons and zucchinis, things that don't do so well in the rainy season. Here. We've got the tomato plants we talked about, the cherry tomatoes, which do perfectly fine in the rain all year long. They actually need water. So in the dry season, if they don't have some water, they're not going to be so happy. But all year long, we can have those underneath everything else. Okay, so you want to think about the whole strata. Right, so there's nothing in a permaculture system, if it's properly designed, where it's ever monoculture. Now you might have, banana circle is a little monoculture, 2 meters in diameter. I mean, right? We're not at any risk there of destroying the land by having one small 2-meter circle of one plant. But generally what we're doing is we're creating a collection of things where everything feeds each other. So it's an amazing system. As I said, in places like Jordan, They're now growing food 5 or 6 years. And once the system is designed, it needs almost no work. Now, there's other things that we do. Obviously, the permaculture design intensive course is a 80-hour course. So I've given you a 40-minute, 45-minute discourse on just a few highlights. But there's a lot more information that I can share with you in a brief amount of time. And if anyone's interested in actually hearing much more about this, we're actually going to be doing a permaculture design intensive course. It's a certification course, which means it teaches the entire manual. It has to. And if you take it, you become a certified permaculture instructor. And we're offering that here. I think it's the 15th or 16th of February. It starts for 2 weeks. So it runs right to the beginning of March. So if you're interested, let me know. We have, you know how much housing we have. We're going to have limited spaces available for that. But I expect we're going to fill that out. And it's an amazing program. So if you're interested, let me know. Any other questions about anything we have or haven't talked about related to permaculture?
How is the harvest organized?
How is harvesting organized? Well, it's not organized the way it typically is when you're growing monoculture. It can't be, right? So it's more labor intensive in a sense, but it might be difficult to do permaculture on a commercial scale. Although that's my intention. My intention is to create a 100 acre minimum of 100 acre permaculture food farm where we're growing as much fruit as we can, as many varieties as possible. And that will mean a lot of labor. It's labor intensive.
I have a question. It's not holistic, but you were saying